Good morning. I hope everyone is looking forward to a good weekend. I hope that all of you are willing to overlook the fact that it is April 9th and the weather feels more like March 9th. And I hope that we get some spring weather here pretty quick. We're going to keep going with Ordinary Grace. We're getting kind of close to where I feel as if I've caught up. And so we're just going to run through to pages 227. It's pretty close to where we were supposed to be in the reading assignment. Again, the preview. Group A is in class today. Group B, that means you're the ones watching it. Remember that you guys will be in class on Monday, and Group A will be back in class next Wednesday. Remember, next week we have Writing Lab C with Melissa, Morgan, Brady, and Josh. And at one point next week, on either the 12th or the 14th, the daily writing will be asking you to start a paragraph, something from the review, and that's will be one of the things that we'll be looking at. And then remember that the quiz over Ordinary Grace, it will be a matching quiz, and that matching quiz over Ordinary Grace will be just like the previous one we've had, and will be 20 questions. It'll be the 19th. And on the 19th, I'll either finish up a couple things of Ordinary Grace, and I'll also start the intro probably for Trail of Lightning. For a preview of today's class, I think I want to talk about the mystery and the idea of, is this a mystery? And I want to go back over some of the things we talked about with the Life We Bury, where I went over what are the elements of mystery. I'm also going to go back to the things that I've talked about forever that you're probably sick and tired of hearing about: character, conflict, connection, and theme. Two things I want to talk about: Jake and the small communities today, and work them into that rubric of character, conflict, connection, and theme. If you look at the back of the hardcover of the book, and I'm guessing someplace on the beginning of any electronic versions of the book you might have, it says that it's the winner of the 2014 Edgar Award for Best Novel. And the Edgar Award, if you look over on the right side of the screen, is from the Mystery Writers Association, and it's named after Edgar Allan Poe, and it's presented to authors of distinguished work in various categories. So this was a novel. It was not a first novel, but it was a novel. And it talks about that the MWA is composed of professionals allied to the crime writing field, aspiring crime writers, and those who are devoted to the genre of writing about crime. And look, there's a murder in the book, so it's probably crime. But the fact is this the best novel for a mystery? Is there enough crime and mystery to make it qualify for the Edgar? It's one of the things that I think we want to talk about. As we're going to analyze something, if it claims to be X, does it have all the elements of X, whatever that X might be? We've talked before about the types of mysteries. There's the traditional mystery. That mystery was started by Edgar Allan Poe, hence the Edgars. It featured a character named Dupin, and it was a character who was eccentric, who had powers of observation and intellect, and who solved crimes because of those powers of observation and intellect. Then we had the hard boiled. We talked about the hard boiled with The Life We Bury, the idea of having a code, the idea of living up to that code, the idea of being set in a rural, or excuse me, in an urban area, the idea of things being dark and gritty. And then we also talked about the police procedural, the idea that this was about the cops, that there were lots of elements going on at the same time, but it was about autopsies and forensics and getting search warrants and doing a bunch of extra paperwork and dealing with bosses who might not understand. And I don't know if there's enough of a mystery to fit traditional, hard boiled, or police procedural. If we look at the traditional, is there a seemingly perfect crime? Well, probably. At this point, we don't know who killed Ariel. I don't know if the purpose of this story is to have the reader solve the puzzle. The purpose of the story, a lot of ways it seems to me, is to watch Jake and to watch Frank grow up. The element of conflict about faith and doubt that Ruth exhibits, that Gus perhaps exhibits. There are two different ways of looking at faith and doubt. The idea of how Nathan has to navigate all of this, the post traumatic stress is an element that goes beyond the puzzle. And yes, there are some darker elements here. We have, the novel, Doyle's sort of a darker character, but I don't think, it's to solve the puzzle. It's about growing up, and it's about families and relationship. Frank does not have a superior mind and powers of detection or deduction. The detective has some unusual physical features or habits. He's 13, but that doesn't mean much. He's narrating his own story, so that doesn't apply. We do have false arrests. Doyle's not really the greatest cop in the world. The cops aren't perfect, but the amateur detective is not running around getting them to fix the problems that they've created. So that part of it doesn't fit. We don't know everything that's happened yet. I'm guessing we have all the clues we need to. Some of those clues are probably misleading. We know we have false accusations. As we go through here, we'll have a couple of them. And I don't think Frank is lying to us to hide the truth about who killed Ariel. These are folks who live in the flats. Yes, we have upper class folk, but most of the folks we're dealing with live in the flats. And we're not going to gather everybody together. I can guarantee you that's not going to happen. Now, perhaps we're dealing with something called a cozy. Again, I don't know if I can call Frank an amateur detective, but cozies are usually met in small towns. That's foots for this one. There's a limited number of suspects. Well, that's because it's a small town. That fits. The sex and violence is minimal. The profanity is minimal. The focus is on the plot and character development. That's probably true. And it's a way to escape to a place they love spending time with people they've come to adore. I think we do enjoy the fact that this is set in a simpler time, but there's a lot of people here we don't like. And I don't know how quite to deal with that. And I don't know if this constitutes a cozy either. I'm not sure in my own head if this is enough of a mystery to fit what the criteria that the Edgars say the crime novel should be. But that's me. And what I want to know right now is there enough crime and detection in the novel to make it a mystery worthy of an Edgar? Why or why not? Give me some why or why nots. Remember that part of all of the papers you're writing here, it's not just your opinion that I'm going to look at. It's, do you have data to back up your opinion? As always, you have a couple of options. You can pause right here, make the comment, and come back and pick it up. Or you can go to the end and remember that, is there enough crime and detection in the novel to make it a mystery worthy of an Edgar? Next thing I want to talk about is Jake. And first of all, we have Jake as brother, and the idea that brothers are hanging out together, that brothers are enjoying each other's company, and that Jake as brother is also going to be the best friend in all the world. And you always have been, and you always will be. And I think in the year of our Lord, 2021, we, especially in the year of the pandemic, we maybe are starting to get a different idea of friend. And I think I want to go back and take a look at that as a little bit what the traditional way of looking at friends were. Remember, in 1961, there was no Facebook. You did not count your friends by the number of friends on Facebook or by the number of followers on Instagram and how many likes your post got. All right? And so I think when we're looking at friends, I think we're looking at Jake at three levels. Aristotle, as I commit philosophy without a license, had three kinds of friendships. There were friendships of utility. And these were friendships where people use each other. And I'm not using use in the terrible, in the way the bad use. I'm using use in the idea of there's a mutual give and take. This is the friend that you call to pick you up from the airport. This is the friend that you call when you need something done. Perhaps this is the friend that calls you when he or she needs something done. But you get utility from it. You benefit from it because that person has something that you need. Then there were friendships of pleasure. And in those friendships of pleasure, it's you just enjoy each other's company. You have a few laughs. The person is funny. The person tells good jokes. You share some interests. You're both gamers, or you both are, people who watch TV shows for the relationships, and you're, always trying to create the, relationships on the TV show or whatever it is. You enjoy each other's company. And then finally, there's the perfect or the good friendship. And the perfect or the good friendship, I think, combines utility, perhaps, it combines pleasure, perhaps, but it goes way beyond that. In the perfect or the good friendship, you appreciate the person for who that person is. You overlook the imperfections. You appreciate the person as a human being, as a fellow creature of God. And it doesn't matter if there's utility involved. It doesn't matter if you enjoy them every second of the day. There is this idea of this perfect friendship, this good friendship, perhaps a friendship of virtue, where you appreciate the person because of the virtues they possess, because of their goodness as a human being. And I think what Frank is talking about for Jake is part of that. And let's begin with taking a look at Jake as prophet. On page 201, he makes this observation, but for her, he's God. And the response was, I didn't have the slightest idea what he was talking about. But I have thought about it since, and I believe I understand. My mother couldn't rail directly at God, so she railed against my father. Once again, Jake had seen and understood something I hadn't. He is appreciating Jake for having this virtue to understand what he can't. And remember, that wasn't happening at the moment. On page 201, he says he has thought about it since. At the moment, Jake was still his best friend. He didn't always think about the whys and wherefores, but he thought about Jake as this prophet now because Jake has seen things and understood things that he hasn't. But it wasn't a friendship of utility. There wasn't much pleasure involved in this because he didn't understand what he was talking about. So I think that connects us back to Jake as the perfect friend. Also, I think we can make connection of Jake as prophet to Moses was a prophet, all right? But Moses said to the Lord, pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. And I think it's important to remember that if we deal with somebody who's prophetic in contemporary books, they usually deal with the archetype. And that archetype involves having some sort of weakness. Moses' case, it was weakness as in he couldn't speak well. Other prophets' case, there's weakness as in they are close to insane and people don't believe them. It's that sort of thing here. But I think Jake's stuttering and his ability to discern and expound the proof put him in that prophetic category and part of that prophetic archetype. And when we deal with myth as we go through here, I think it's important to understand that Kruger, I think, is pulling little bits of that into this book. And whether the reader is supposed to make that connection consciously or not, or unconsciously, I think it's there. The other connection I think is there is small communities. In a small town, nothing is private. And I think that that's true whether it's a small town of 350 like the one I grew up in, small town of a couple thousand like many of you grew up in, or smaller. I think that's true in a campus community of, whatever, 400 or 500, however many people are on campus here at Mount Marty. And word spreads with the incomprehensibility of magic and the speed of plague. Throughout parts of this year, off and on, we've understood the speed of plague. And we've, I think, dealt with how could people find out so much stuff? Now, perhaps in the year of our Lord 2021, some of that incomprehensibility of magic goes to the how could I have been so dumb to post that on Facebook? I could go off on a long philosophical rant without a license about technology and magic being the same thing. I won't today, but I do think this is about every small town, every small community. It was true in 1961. It's true in 2021. But one of the things about literature that I think is extremely important, at its simplest, literature, I think, reveals that humans have been the same and have dealt with the same situations forever. So, if I go to 33 BC, or if you want 33 before the Common Era, and then I go to 1961 and I go to 2021. Rumor is the swiftest of all evils. Speed lends her strength and she winds vigor as she goes. Small at first through fear, soon she mounts up to heaven and walks the ground with head hidden in the clouds. In other words, rumor grows, and it is swift of foot, fleet of wing, speed of magic. And it is a monster, awful and huge, who for the many feathers in her body has as many watchful eyes beneath, wondrous to tell, as many tongues, as many sounding mouths, as many pricked up ears. The whole idea, this comes from the poem The Aeneid. It is the founding poem of Rome. It is a continuation of a character from the Trojan War. We know it was written in 33 BC. And so we have this, or 30 BC, I think I should change that. But we have this situation where talking about rumor, whether it's in a book written in 2014 about 1961, or a poem, an epic poem written before Christ, rumor is swift, rumor spreads, rumor destroys. We can't comprehend it. And I think all small communities feel that. And it just is something I think that reminds us that things that are true now have been true for a long, long time. If you haven't done the daily writing, remember to go back. Hope all of you have a good weekend. And we will see you guys who are watching in video. We'll see you in class on Monday.